Welcome to Crypto Corner. I'm Jenny Horne, and it's time to take a look at the crypto and overall Bitcoin space. Joining us today is, of course, Nathan Peterson, the Director of Derivatives Analysis at the Schwab Center for Financial Research. So as always, Nate, we appreciate you so much for joining us today to shed some color on Bitcoin touching a new all-time high in Wednesday's session. Its second time, actually, in 2025 with a new all-time high. So what do you say technically right now when we're looking at Bitcoin and Ethereum?
Yeah, Jenny, what an interesting day to be talking crypto because there's so much going on, but it's not just that Bitcoin is hitting a fresh all-time high, but it's what's going on the periphery, and that being essentially what's going on with the big, beautiful bill that is having trouble getting passed. There was a spike in Japanese long-term yields overnight. Stock futures were down coming into the day, yet Bitcoin was holding in there. Bitcoin's supposed to be a risk asset, remember? And it's actually holding up relatively well. And even in today's price action, I thought it was really interesting that, yes, Bitcoin hit a fresh all-time high around 109,800. And we saw a weak 20-year U.S. Treasury auction that occurred around 1 o'clock Eastern time. That sent Treasury yields higher. It sent the stock market lower. And Bitcoin has pulled back from that all-time high of above 109K, currently around 107K right now. But if you look at the chart here, what we've got a 9-month candlestick chart up here. Of course, that 200 SMA provided some support back in April. It's been off to the races after hitting a low of roughly 74K back in March. Then it has rallied up to a fresh all-time high. Jenny, what's interesting about this is that all-time high of roughly 109K was hit in December, and we backed off, ran back up to that level back in January. We backed off. And today, of course, we did technically make a fresh all-time high. It's going to be interesting to see if yields misbehave and if the stock market rolls over. Like, let's say we come in tomorrow and stock futures are down. Of course, recording on Wednesday. This will be, the viewers will be watching this on Thursday. But what will be interesting is if Bitcoin will follow the stock market lower, because what you don't want to see if you're a Bitcoin bull is for this third all-time high to be touched, which would potentially be a triple top. What you'd like to see is for a nice, steady, relative strength in the face of some weakness in the stock market, and then, of course, some follow-through upside action so that, we don't want to see a reflexive sell-off after hitting this new all-time high. So it's at an inflection point right now. This will be really interesting to watch over the next couple of days. If you're a bull, you'd like to see this creep up, above 110, regardless of what's going on in the stock market, because the question has been out there, if there is basically trouble in the fiscal sustainability narrative, and that could be showing up whether it's over in Japan or whether it's in the US and it's showing up in the bond market, that presumably is good for the price of Bitcoin. But we know that Bitcoin also has that characteristic of being a risk asset. So which way does it go? And is it possible that potentially it could go up in either scenario? We're going to have to wait and see. Also interesting, if we could pull up a chart of Ethereum, this caught my eye too, Jenny. If you look at Ethereum, it's definitely been playing catch up here recently. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. And if you look at Ethereum, it's ran up to the 200-day simple moving average on the underside. It's been underperforming Bitcoin if you look collectively. But yeah, thank you for the chart here. And what it looks like, in my view, is that, yes, that 200 SMA, at least right now, is providing resistance. But it looks like we also have a cup and handle formation. So you can see that that broad cup there, and then the handle formation where it comes down. In order to get the confirmation, you want to see a break above the high that we hit basically a week ago, and that's also going to coincide, presumably, with a break above the 200 SMA. That is the bullish kind of technical setup that you'd like to see if you're bullish on Ethereum.
Okay, and I'm glad you mentioned the bullish case for, both of these names, but let's also talk a notorious bull in this space, a huge crypto proponent long before it was even deemed cool, perhaps, and that's Jack Dorsey and some of the developments he's been making with his Bitcoin improvement proposal. Walk us through that.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, Jack Dorsey, founder of Twitter. He's been a crypto proponent before I even knew what a Bitcoin was. I have a lot of respect for him. He's just one of those really smart CEOs that seems like he can, manage a couple companies at the same time. But he came out with a proposal. So you can, as part of the Bitcoin community, you can have a BIP or a Bitcoin improvement proposal that you can put out into the community that can be voted on. And he's not proposing any kind of change to the code of Bitcoin, but what he is proposing is that we get a change from the shift of calling 1/1 millionth of a Bitcoin a satoshi in honor of the founder or the owner or the group, whatever, Satoshi Nakamoto, the creator of Bitcoin. And he would like to have that be changed so that they're called bits or a Bitcoin. So let me give you an example, Jenny. If you were to receive some Bitcoin from me, it might show up as you have received 0.00002222 Bitcoin or BTC. What Jack is proposing is that we change that configuration such that it will be called bits or a Bitcoin. So instead of one Bitcoin being 100 million Satoshis, he wants to have one Bitcoin being called BTC, and that we can change the Satoshis to bits or Bitcoin. So in that example I gave you, you would instead of receiving 0.00022222 BTC, it would be 2,222 Bitcoins. Now, the proponents of that say this simplifies it. It'll be easier, for, transactions. If it's going to be a currency at some time, it just makes common sense. But those that are against it are saying, look, if you change the naming around this, this might create some confusion within the community. So now there's not going to be what we all know is 21 million Bitcoin that are capped right now. That's in the code. But we have to basically socialize that, well, since we've changed the Satoshi to Bitcoin, now it's 2.1 quadrillion Bitcoin that are in existence. And, look, I have a lot of respect for Jack. I think you've got to be careful when you change some of the naming conventions around here just because of the perception. And, Jenny, the one of the beauties or the characteristics of Bitcoin that many love is immutability. Immutability is you cannot change the code, or it's nearly impossible to do so without a complete consensus within the community that it should be done. But I'm not suggesting that what Jack is proposing is to change the code, but he is changing some aspect, some characteristic, the naming convention that makes Bitcoin so unique. And perhaps, that could create some confusion for those that have not got into Bitcoin or are early or have just gotten into the space and then are now understanding that, there's 2.1 quadrillion Bitcoin, not to mention all of the platforms would need to update to reflect that. So there would have to be buy-in basically collectively.
Okay, and even outside of that, as we always do check in on how things are shaping up in Washington, of course, regarding the Trump administration, which has been definitely a friend to the crypto world as a whole. But the Senate did advance this pretty major cryptocurrency regulation bill earlier Monday this week, which was this bipartisan vote nearly 2 weeks after it was blocked, actually, by Senate Democrats. So this is a huge piece of news, the vote on the Genius Act as it's being deemed. So walk us through that story.
Certainly, yeah. So the Genius Act, I think first, largely within the community, the expectation is that legislation is going to pass. It is going to move forward. Yes, it could hit some hiccups like we saw a couple weeks ago, like you referenced. But this is really legislation around stable coins. And the way that I look at this, I know that Bitcoin's trading at fresh all-time highs. It does coincide with some positive news on this getting passed through the Senate. But I think more so what's related to the price of Bitcoin is what's going on with the potential de-dollarization and the fiscal sustainability and that narrative. I think that's what's driving it. But I think it is important to see this legislation pass through. And I'll say this, I think in terms of, of validating this blockchain technology and cryptocurrency in general, when this legislation is seen as being passed, that is a net positive just to validate cryptocurrency as a store of value and an asset class. I think that's great. I will say this, as we move through time and legislation gets proposed, I think we also need to be cognizant that the legislation is conducive for the adoption of cryptocurrency whilst not trying to infringe or contain any aspects of cryptocurrency or Bitcoin, which is basically open source. So there's not any legislation that I'm pointing to that is trying to impede the growth of this asset class. But I think that's something to keep in mind. So I think this is a net positive. I think it's largely seen that it will ultimately get passed. And it's just another, checkbox for the bulls in my mind.
I completely agree, and good news for the stable coins. Unfortunately, the dollar's volatility seems to only be the winning recipe for the entire crypto asset class, because right now it's unstoppable, and a force that's definitely been fun to watch. But so appreciate it and all of the wonderful crypto insight. Nate Peterson, of course, for joining us today. And I'm Jenny Horne. That'll do it for Crypto Corner for this week. Reminder to tune in next week.